How did the Protestant Reformation affect England? We talked about Calvinism and Anabaptists in Switzerland, the Huguenots in France and the Netherlands. We talked about Lutheranism rising in Germany. The Pope held strong Catholic faith in Italy and the surrounding area, but what about as far out as England? What's going on in England? Well, King Henry VIII of England had demonstrated that he was a devout Catholic, by writing a denunciation of Luther's ideas in a 1521 tract titled In Defense of the Seven Sacraments, which led the Pope to bestow upon Henry the title of Defender of the Faith. These actions seem to indicate that England would remain a Catholic country, unshaken by the Reformation. Looks can be deceiving. Nevertheless, anti-Catholic sentiment did exist in England. Earlier movements had decried the power of the Pope and called for an end to clerical abuses within the Church. The English Reformation was not prompted by religious issues, however, but by political concerns. So our Reformation in England is going to look a lot different. It's not going to be about religious arguments, but political ones. Henry was unhappy that his wife Catherine had not produced a male heir. For his kingdom to continue, he had to produce a prince. Their only child was Mary, who would later become queen. Henry wanted to have his marriage to Catherine annulled so that he could marry another woman who, hopefully, could give birth to a son. Now, they didn't know back then that it's the man that determines the gender. So he thought, if I have a new wife, I could probably get a son. He had also taken a keen interest in another woman, Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn. Keep in mind, Catholics are not allowed to divorce. So this is a big ask. Although canon law did provide some justification for granting Henry an annulment, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who happened to be Catherine's nephew, did not wish to see his aunt put aside, or to lose his connection to the English government. Consequently, Charles pressured Pope Clement VII to deny the annulment. So the German says, don't end that marriage. I'll lose all my influence in England if you do. Ultimately, Archbishop of Canterbury Thomas Cranmer and Principal Secretary Thomas Cromwell convinced Henry VIII to seek an annulment through the British ecclesiastical courts. So if the Pope won't do it, maybe our own churches in England will. In order to ensure that the annulment was granted, Parliament passed a law that cut off any appeals to Rome, thereby ending papal authority in England. Cranmer then annulled the marriage to Catherine, and Henry secretly married Anne Boleyn, who was already pregnant. So the Pope says no. The Church of England decides we don't need the Pope's permission. Three acts codified the break with Rome. There's the Act of Restraint and Appeals, denied the Pope's authority. The final say is with the English Church, not with the Catholic Pope. There was the Act of Supremacy, which proclaimed the king the head of the English Church. So not only do they not listen to the Pope in Rome, but they hold the English king as the new head of the church, kind of like the English Pope. Then there was the Act of Succession in 1534, it required all subjects to take a loyalty oath to the king as the head of the church. So basically, don't listen to the Pope, listen to me, swear that you'll listen to me. Those are the three acts. After executing Anne for infidelity, Henry married Jane Seymour. So his marriage to Anne Boleyn didn't last very long. So now he marries Jane Seymour. He's on wife 3 now, who died giving birth to a son, Edward. Edward the Sixth. He finally gets his son. Henry then married, because his wife died, childbirth, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr in that order. Yes, he had 6 wives. Well, before moving on, there's a little rhyme you might be interested in. The 6 wives of Henry VIII. Um, he beheaded the first. He, oh, I'm sorry. He divorced, beheaded the second, and the third one died. And then his fourth wife, they divorced. The fifth one, he also beheaded. And the sixth one outlived Henry. So it goes the 6 wives of Henry VIII. Goes divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. That's a little rhyme to keep them all straight. Sir Thomas More. As Lord Chancellor, Sir Thomas More served as both political and spiritual advisor to the monarchy in England. More was a committed Catholic and had helped Henry VIII write in defense of the 7 sacraments, back when he was acting pro-Catholic. So More therefore opposed the break from the Catholic Church. He did not like the king becoming the head of the Church of England. And he didn't support the annulment of Henry's marriage to Catherine. More refused to attend the coronation ceremony of Anne Boleyn when she was made queen, which greatly angered Henry. Not showing up to a coronation is the same as saying, I don't recognize your authority. More then refused to acknowledge the act of succession or take the oath of supremacy that recognized the king as the head of the church. King Henry saw these acts as traitorous and ordered More executed. More was beheaded on July 6, 1535. The Catholic Church viewed More as a martyr and eventually made him a saint in 1935. Died for his beliefs. So, Henry shakes the Church of England up. It was treason to say that the king was not the head of the Church of England. You can't recognize the Pope anymore. Henry dissolved more than 600 monasteries. That's a lot of church land he grabbed up. Henry issued 10 articles, which affirmed the basic tenets of Lutheranism. It emphasized faith over works. Well, Henry also changed by doing the 6 articles, passed 2 years later. They tended to assert Catholic teachings such as transubstantiation and clerical celibacy. So the Church of England's not very different than the Catholic Church, except for no Pope. It's Henry who's in charge. He decides. In many ways, the substance of Catholicism remained in England, so much so that Henry actually had a Catholic Mass said for him when he died. So we can again see this was not a religious split, but a political one. Who has power, the king or the pope? Well, the king wants the power of the church in his own kingdom. This was not about changing the faith. Despite protests from some who still supported Catholicism, the Pope, English monasteries were dissolved under the leadership of Thomas Cromwell. Not only did the monarchy benefit financially from the sales of the church lands, but many nobles purchased the former monastic properties, increasing their land holdings. So everyone kind of benefited politically and economically from dismantling the Catholic Church in England. The real Reformation and religious struggle in England developed after Henry's death. Little baby Edward VI moved the country toward Protestantism. He was a child king. Mary I back in moved the country back in the direction of Catholicism. She's known as Bloody Mary because she would go out killing Protestants, making sure everyone stayed Catholic. Then, after Mary dies, Elizabeth takes over, another daughter of Henry. And Elizabeth moves the country toward Protestantism, and the golden age of England. So she was a great Protestant ruler, Elizabeth I. Very good ruler. Mary, not so much. Bloody Mary, not so much. Not a great ruler. All right, let's talk about little baby Edward. You can see here in the picture, he's just a child, and he died as a child. Never really got to run the country. Since Edward was underage when he inherited the throne, a regency council ruled for him. The king's council was in charge, not little baby Edward. His uncle, Edward Seymour, however, seized control of the regency and ruled as Lord Protector on little baby Edward's behalf. Under the influence of his uncle and his advisors, little baby Edward's rule witnessed the strengthening of Protestantism in England. Archbishop Cranmer oversaw the implementation of many Protestant ideas, such as allowing priests to marry, not a very Catholic thing. The Protestant ideas of banning images and icons in church buildings, and instituting a formal liturgy that was used throughout all the churches in England. One particular element of the liturgy that Cranmer instituted was the Book of Common Prayer, a collection of scripture readings and other elements of worship that outlined how a church service should be conducted. So they're standardizing church services in England, making them uniquely English. By standardizing Sunday services throughout England, the Book of Common Prayer provided English Protestantism with a sense of unity and reaffirmed monarchical control of religion in England. Another instance of the state controlling the church instead of separating church and state. So, little baby Edward dies young. No more male heirs, so it'll fall to Mary the First. Little baby Edward was not old enough to marry or father children. So it's going to go to his sister, Mary the First. Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, was married to King Philip II of Spain, who was also Catholic. Catholic queen, Catholic king of a Protestant England? That can't end well. Upon assuming the throne, she made it clear that she intended to return the country to Catholicism, a development that generated a great deal of opposition. Remember, all the aristocrats were rich off the church lands they took. During her reign, she reinstituted many Catholic practices and reaffirmed the position of the Pope as the head of the church. She also was determined to completely roll back the influence of the Reformation in England and had no qualms about executing Protestants. Practice earned her the name Bloody Mary. How did this work, bringing Catholicism back? Mary encouraged the restoration of Catholic worship practices and ordered her subjects to submit to the authority of the Catholic Church and the Pope. She also abolished Protestant worship. Nobles feared that she would confiscate the former monastic lands they took, that they had gained under Henry VIII's rule. Mary chose not to do this because she realized that she needed the support of the nobility. Mary moved against Protestants who refused to return to Catholicism. She had some 300 of them executed, accusing most of heresy and burning them at the stake, including former Archbishop of Canterbury Thomas Cranmer. Ultimately, Mary's persecution had the opposite effect of what she intended, and England actually was more Protestant at the end of her reign than at the onset. Really backfired. Well, Mary doesn't live forever, and her sister Elizabeth takes over. Elizabeth was a Protestant, though not particularly devout. She came to realize that she had to restore Protestantism and give it real substance in order to produce religious peace in England. Consequently, she moved to formalize certain key elements of church organization and doctrine. In 1559, Parliament passed the Act of Uniformity and the Act of Succession, which established the foundation of the Church of England. So she's picking up where Henry left off, her father left off. The Church of England adopted Protestant doctrines but retained the organization and structure of the Catholic Church. Elizabeth also attempted to calm religious controversy by issuing 39 Articles, a document that outlined the broad creed of faith for Anglican Church of the Church of England. Anglican Church is the Church of England. She also formally endorsed the Book of Common Prayer. The Anglican Church's retention of some Catholic practices, such as altar rails and baptismal crosses, provoked some opposition from those who wanted to rid Anglicanism of all remnants of Catholicism. These dissenters organized and became known as Puritans because they wanted to purify the Anglican Church, the Church of England. Super anti Catholic. Puritans want pure Protestantism, no sign of Catholicism. Some Puritans advocated the separation of church and state. But Elizabeth planned on using her religion to further her own purposes, specifically as a tool for helping her promote unity throughout the country, which is a big reason they call her reign the Golden Age of the English monarchy. She was an excellent unifying ruler who reestablished Protestantism. Maybe it looked a little Catholic, and we had the grumblings of the Puritans due to that. That'll end today's lecture.